My wealthy in-laws dismissed me at a business gala. Cousin-in-law snorted. What would she know about investments? Mother-in-law said. She married in for money. Then the host thanked me as the keynote speaker and lead investor. Their faces went pale. Honestly, Annalise, my mother-in-law said with a tight smile as she swirled wine in a glass that probably cost more than my office chair, it's admirable you try to keep busy. Not everyone's cut out for real investments, but at least you found a hobby. Across from her, Myra, the golden child cousin-in-law with her precious Wharton degree, let out a sharp little laugh. What would she know about investments? Tech startups? She married into money and that's fine. Everyone plays to their strengths. I smiled, said nothing, and took a slow sip from my glass. I didn't feel the need to answer. Because in less than 20 minutes, I'd be standing on stage at the front of the ballroom, introduced not as Vincent's wife, not as that tech girl, but as the keynote speaker and lead investor in the very initiative they'd flown across the country to celebrate. And they had no idea. I didn't come from money. I was born and raised in Missoula, Montana. My dad ran a humble print shop, used to come home with his hands stained with ink and grease, and my mom was the assistant librarian at our local branch. I remember spending weekends helping her shelve books or playing with the Dewey Decimal System like it was a game. We weren't rich, but I never felt poor either. I grew up believing in hard work, self-reliance, and finishing what you start. That kind of childhood doesn't prepare you for the social labyrinth of old money. It prepares you to build things, to fix things, not to inherit things. By the time I was 30, I'd taught myself to code, gotten rejected by more startup accelerators than I can count, and finally secured a modest grant that helped me and a handful of idealistic engineers launch a company focused on microgrid technology. It was ugly in the beginning, ugly and raw and grueling. There were nights I worked until 2 a.m., slept under my desk, and woke up with a keyboard imprint on my cheek. I had to beg local investors to even give me 10 minutes of their time. More than once, I ate nothing but black coffee and saltines for days. No one believed in us except me, and that had to be enough. I met Vincent at a regional conference in Denver. He was tall, tailored, and every inch the polished finance professional. He had that slightly detached confidence that some people mistake for intelligence, but under it, he was curious. That's what caught me off guard. He asked about my company like he meant it, like he actually cared what I had to say. He didn't dismiss me, not then at least. Vincent's world was marble foyers, catered brunches, and silent drivers who waited outside in black town cars. His family had built wealth over decades, first in oil, then in real estate, then branching out into capital firms and fund management. His mother, Sybil, was the kind of woman who never raised her voice but always made herself heard. Our first meeting, I wore a thrifted blazer. She wore Chanel and a smile like a knife. "You're very grounded," she told me over tea. That's refreshing. Vincent's had so many aspirational girlfriends. It's nice to see someone more practical. I should have known then, but I was in love, or at least in hope. Vincent proposed the following year. We had a small wedding. My side was mostly friends, scrappy founders, and my family in second-hand suits. His side looked like they'd walked out of a magazine, cold, immaculate, and quietly judging. The months that followed were a lesson in slow rejection. Sybil would invite me to luncheons, only to spend the entire time talking over me or introducing me to her friends as Vincent's sweet little wife. She dabbles in technology. I was treated like a novelty. A pet project. Myra, meanwhile, made a hobby out of backhanded digs. At dinner once, she asked if I really understood what venture capital was or if I just handled the website side. Vincent never defended me, not really. He'd brush it off, tell me, "That's just how they are, don't take it personally." He didn't understand that each of those comments was a small, controlled burn. Over time, they became scar tissue, so I stopped trying to impress them. Instead, I poured myself into the business. We made breakthroughs, huge ones. Our microgrid software had applications beyond anything we anticipated. In remote locations, disaster zones, and off-grid communities, it worked. It worked. We caught the eye of a major tech conglomerate, and when they offered to acquire us, I said no. Instead, I negotiated. I stayed on as chief strategy officer. I took equity. I reinvested. I joined advisory boards, got invited to round tables, and started speaking at sustainability conferences. I was featured in Forbes, and Sybil still introduced me as working in tech or something. Vincent was supportive in his way, but always distant, as if my success was inconvenient. He wasn't cruel, but he never really saw me the way I had hoped he would. The turning point came with the invitation to the Sustainable Capital Gala in San Francisco, a sprawling black-tie event held at the Palace Hotel and backed by major industry players. It was hosted by the coalition I had helped fund behind the scenes as a lead investor. Vincent's family had no idea I was involved. They just knew it was a green thing and a good opportunity to mingle. They flew out. Rented suites. Sybil made a point to ask if I had something nice to wear. Myra came prepared with her laptop and elevator pitches. I let them talk. At the pre-gala mixer, I stood beside Vincent as Myra regaled the group with her insights on emerging markets and her new venture ideas. She turned to me at one point, eyebrows arched. "Still involved in that little startup?" I nodded. "Still very involved." Sybil sipped her wine. "You really made it work for yourself, didn't you? Not everyone who marries into money uses the opportunity so productively." I smiled politely. Not a word more. When the host took the stage, I could feel the room shift. Spotlights dimmed. Waiters cleared away dessert. The crowd stilled. Then his voice rang out through the speakers. "Tonight, we'd like to honor a woman whose investments, vision, and relentless pursuit of sustainable innovation helped make this entire initiative possible. She's a pioneer in the microgrid space, an investor in more than a dozen clean tech firms, and someone I've personally admired for years." Pause. "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Annalise Rhodes." My name echoed through the ballroom. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked toward the stage. Behind me, I could feel it, that stiff silence. The kind of awkward stillness that follows years of quiet belittlement. Sybil's hand must have frozen mid-toast. Myra's mouth, I imagine, was slightly agape. I didn't look back. I stepped onto the stage under the soft wash of amber lighting, heart steady, heels clicking softly on polished wood. The applause was generous, but my mind wasn't on the crowd. It lingered, just briefly, on the table I had left behind, on Sybil's frozen smile, on Myra's likely stiffened posture. I began my speech as I always did, not with numbers but with people. I talked about my father, who repaired his printing press with duct tape and prayers. About my mother, who cataloged more than books. She cataloged hope, patience, stories of people no one else would read about. I shared how the idea for my company was born during a storm that knocked out our town's power for a week, and how watching my neighbors pull together with borrowed generators and flashlights made me question why resilience had to be such a scramble. I didn't name-drop corporations or flex numbers. I spoke plainly about power, access, equity. I talked about building, not buying, investing not for show but for survival. When I finished, the room was still. And then they stood. One by one. It wasn't a roar of applause, it was something deeper. A slow-building ovation that felt earned. After I left the stage, people I'd only ever seen in industry headlines came up to shake my hand. Some asked for meetings. Others offered congratulations with an earnestness you don't often get in rooms like that. Vincent found me near the corridor just outside the ballroom. He looked pale, but not because he was embarrassed. It was something closer to awe. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You didn't." He reached for my hand, but I kept it at my side. We stood in silence for a moment, the din of the gala muffled by thick carpets and gilded walls. "You really never told me how involved you were," he said. "You're one of the actual investors," I nodded. "I don't just work in tech. I will help fund it now." His eyes flicked past me toward the crowd of people still buzzing from my talk. "You're bigger than any of them realize." "I was never trying to be bigger," I said. "I just wanted to build something that mattered." Vincent nodded slowly, like he was finally seeing me in full color. But the truth is, it was too late for that kind of realization to matter much anymore. Back inside, Sybil was stiffly chatting with a venture fund partner who clearly knew who I was. She didn't make eye contact with me until I was within arm's reach. Then, she stood, still trying to project composure. "Annalise," she said, trying to smile like it wasn't cracked at the corners. "I had no idea you were involved with this level of initiative." I returned her smile, steady, polite. "There's a lot you never asked about," she faltered. Myra was standing beside her, holding a champagne glass like it was a shield. She looked defeated. Gone was the smirk, the air of superiority. "You didn't tell us you'd be speaking tonight," Myra finally said, her voice clipped. "You didn't ask." The conversation dissolved quickly after that. I wasn't unkind, but I wasn't obliging either. For once, I didn't shrink myself to fit in the tight space they'd reserved for me. Later that evening, during the post-event reception, a young woman approached me. She said she was finishing her master's in electrical engineering and wanted advice on launching a startup. She'd grown up in a small town in Wyoming. Her parents didn't know anything about tech, but she wanted to build something that mattered too. I sat with her for an hour, talked through her ideas, offered feedback, and gave her my contact info. That's the kind of conversation that makes everything else, the years of being belittled, ignored, brushed off, worth it. It was nearly midnight when Vincent and I finally left. In the car ride back to the hotel, he kept glancing at me, like he was trying to recalibrate the image he'd had of me in his head all these years. "Why didn't you tell them?" he finally asked. "I was never trying to prove anything to them." I turned my gaze to the city lights flickering past the window. "But they kept pushing the narrative. They assumed I married you for money. They never considered I might have had my own." He was quiet after that. I think the weight of it, their words, my silence, everything was settling in. Back in the suite, Sybil had left a handwritten note on the desk. "Congratulations on your success," it read. "We're very proud." I folded it neatly and left it where I found it, because I didn't need their pride. I didn't need their validation. I had already built what I came to build. The next morning, the suite was filled with the quiet hum of room service and the scent of dark roast coffee. I sat alone on the balcony, watching the sun break through the morning haze over San Francisco, the fog thinning like curtains being drawn back from a stage. Vincent came out after a while, coffee in hand, looking slightly worn. He wasn't used to being on the periphery of a spotlight, not even my spotlight. "I owe you an apology," he said, sitting beside me. "Not just for last night, for all of it. I should have stood up for you more, should have corrected them when they downplayed you. I didn't realize how much I let slide until I saw you up there." I didn't respond immediately. The truth was, I had stopped waiting for that apology years ago. "Do you remember when your mother told me I should be grateful to be part of your family?" I asked, my voice steady. "I was, for a while. Then I realized she was never grateful to have me in it." "She doesn't deserve to be," he muttered, almost to himself. I shook my head gently. "It's not about her. It never was. I stopped looking for her approval a long time ago. I just wanted a partner who saw me." He looked at me, really looked this time. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, and for a second, I believed he understood now. But it was too late for that understanding to build a bridge over the silence that had filled our marriage. He had been content in his world, and I had learned to thrive in mine. We flew home the next day, Vincent quieter than usual, but trying, offering small courtesies, brushing my hand with his, asking about my next board meeting. I accepted the gestures, but I didn't return them. Something fundamental had shifted, and we both knew it. Over the next few weeks, the shift became undeniable. Sybil sent me an email, a formal one. She thanked me for representing the family with dignity and said she hoped I would consider advising on the family's green investment strategy. I nearly laughed. The woman who once questioned whether I knew what a venture fund was now asking for my input on how to save their bleeding portfolio. Myra followed suit with a LinkedIn request and a private message. "We'd love to hear more about your insights on tech-forward investments," she wrote. "Coffee sometime." I didn't block them. I didn't reply either. Let them sit with that silence. I had learned to carry it for years. Instead, I forwarded Sybil's message to my assistant and asked her to draft a polite decline. "Thank you for your note. I'm currently focused on scaling my impact initiatives and am unable to advise on outside portfolios at this time." It was the corporate version of no, thank you, and you missed your chance. A few months later, I was invited to co-chair a panel at the UN Climate Week in New York. I spoke alongside leaders from Europe and Asia, and after the session, a major global bank approached me to lead an advisory group focused on sustainable technologies in underserved regions. The announcement made headlines. My photo was suddenly in every publication Vincent's family once used as their social proof. I was no longer the tech girl they tolerated. I was the woman with access to capital, power, and influence. And they had all ignored me, until they couldn't. Vincent and I started to live more separately. Not in conflict, just in quiet disconnection. We had grown in different directions. I still respected him, but the version of love I once held onto had withered under the weight of too many missed chances and too little belief. I moved into my own place in Sausalito, a house with clean lines and sunlit corners, with space for a small rooftop garden and an office that overlooked the bay. I filled it with soft colors, good books, and silence that healed. When I told Vincent I wanted a separation, he didn't fight me on it. "I always knew you were brilliant," he said softly. "I just didn't know how to be next to someone like you without feeling small." "You weren't small," I told him honestly. "You just didn't grow." We finalized the divorce quietly. No drama, no lawyers dragging us through mud. I didn't take anything from him, didn't need to. My wealth was my own, so was my peace. The final moment of quiet revenge came almost by accident. A year after the gala, I was invited to be a guest judge at a pitch event for women-led startups. As I was reviewing the applications ahead of time, I saw a name that caught my eye, Myra Dunford. She was pitching a new platform for sustainable home investment. Interesting, but derivative. She had rebranded herself as a clean economy advocate. I skimmed through her deck, pretty, buzzword-laden, thin on originality. When she stepped on stage and saw me at the judging table, her eyes widened just slightly. I gave nothing away, just listened. When it came time for feedback, I offered it gently but truthfully. "Strong visuals, but the financial modeling is weak. If you're looking to raise, you'll need a clearer roadmap and more transparency around long-term returns. And I'd suggest focusing on your differentiators. Right now, it's reading too much like a derivative of existing platforms." She thanked me with a forced smile. She knew it wasn't personal, but she also knew exactly what it was. Afterward, one of the other judges, an investor friend of mine, leaned over and whispered, "You know her." I smiled faintly. "Once, not anymore. Now I spend my time mentoring young women who are exactly where I was 10, 15 years ago, smart, overlooked, underestimated. I write checks where it counts. I show up where others once slammed the door. Sybil still sends the occasional holiday card. Myra tags me in articles sometimes, hoping for a share or a comment. I wish them well from a distance. But I never respond, because they had their chance to get to know me, to respect me, to see me for who I was, and they didn't. So when they look at me now, all they can do is wonder what else they missed while they were busy looking down. That's the real revenge. Not a raised voice or slammed door, just success. Quiet, steady, undeniable success, and silence where their approval used to matter.